unfortunately. So that's why we're over here in my room. I'm so glad that you found us. And thank you for your patience with us getting started. I'm going to put my slides in the chat so you have access to them. And let me just say hello. My name is Heather Uhanic. I am a learning and achievement specialist in the Office of School Support and Wellbeing. And you're in the right place if you are looking for the session, Let's Get Real About Whiteness. So let's dive on in because I know we have limited time today. So I just wanted to tell you a little bit about me. This is my 23rd year teaching, my 23rd year, and I've done them all in MCPS. I grew up in Montgomery County, but I attended Catholic school. So MCPS was a new world to me. And unlike you all, I was trained in elementary, but I chose to work in middle school. And so all of my classroom experience in MCPS and as a staff development teacher, because I was a staff development teacher before I was a specialist, has been at middle school. So I started at Silver Spring International, right near downtown Silver Spring, and taught 8th grade. Then I moved over and opened a Mario Loiterman in Aspen Hill. I ended up at Neelsville in Germantown for a little while. And then the last school that I was at is in the community in which I live, which is Gaithersburg Middle School. So I've had a variety of experiences in MCPS, and they are actually all in schools that, if we gave the Title I designation in middle school, which we're starting to do, probably would have been Title I. So the other thing that's important to know about me is that I wasn't always passionate about equity work. I was very lucky to have my partner on the left there, Dr. Elena Murray. She is the principal of Shady Grove Middle School. And together we co-founded and we still co-coordinate the Equity and Excellence in Education certificate and master's programs at McDaniel College. And I really credit Elena for being very patient with me. As a white person, I grew up with a lot of privilege. I didn't have to struggle with race and racism. I was allowed to be colorblind. And so I had a lot of learning and catching up to do in terms of developing my racial literacy. And Elena was instrumental in that and still is to this day. On the right is Dr. Yolanda Abel. She was my advisor at Johns Hopkins, where I got my doctorate. I think the title is educational leadership, but I studied whiteness. And I know that that is a privilege, right? To be able to study something theoretically that other people experience oppressively day to day. So that was my passion, still is my passion, thinking about researching, talking about whiteness, because it was something that was invisible to me for so very long. And last but not least, the people that I do this work with for are my kids. We live in the Gaithersburg cluster. My kids are the quote unquote minority here. And that's something that I'm actually happy about. Every day is a struggle to be an anti-racist. I always say I'm an anti-racist in progress. And so I hope my kids are too. And from a very young age, I've been trying to raise them to be anti-racist, even things as simple as, looking at cars that are pulled over. And I would say, what do you notice about the driver? And pretty quickly, they started to make their own connections about how race operates in the world, in the communities that we live in their experiences as students. So that's another reason I do this work is really, I want it to be a better world for my kids, but I want my kids as white folks to be a part of it. So, today what we're going to do, we're going to talk about this idea, what is white supremacy culture, which may already be triggering some feelings for some of you, just the term, and that's okay. We're going to reflect on what does it mean for you personally, and professionally. And then hopefully you'll have an idea of kind of what anti-racist action can you take now that you have kind of interrogated the concept of whiteness. I want to be very clear that you're not going to walk away with a strategy to apply in your classroom tomorrow. It's not that kind of session. It's about developing our lenses to reflect on how whiteness shows up in the decisions we make. So if that means you want to join another session, that's fine too. I just kind of wanted to be clear about our outcomes for today. If you're just joining us, I'm going to put our slides in the chat again so that you can catch up to where we are. You can follow along as we journey into whiteness together. So I always start sessions with working assumptions, just so that you can be really clear about what I'm coming to the space with as a facilitator. As a teacher, I believe this. As a staff development teacher, I believe this. As a learning and achievement specialist, I believe this. Everyone can learn and grow, even adults. And I want to acknowledge that when we're doing anti-racist work, the learning of people who look like me, who identify as white, can't come at the expense of people of color or people of the global majority. Meaning it's not my job to facilitate people of color sharing stories of trauma and hurtful, harmful experiences just so that I can learn, since I didn't have those experiences, at least because of my race. Discomfort is natural and it's part of learning. A lot of times we want to run away from it, but my discomfort as a white person is not more important than the discomfort of people of color in the space, or people with gender privilege, sexuality privilege, any other kind of privilege. We can't center the comfort of people who have privilege. And then finally, I absolutely believe, and I know I'm in a room full of elementary colleagues who I think are the hardest working people in the system, that as educators, we did not get into the profession to hurt kids. We're trying to do the right thing and do right by kids every day. So we have good intentions, and we're at a point where we need to start looking at impact, not just intention. We have to see what the actual, how our decisions land with the people that we're trying to serve, because we've all been socialized into this system. So we need to think about more than just, what our goal is or what we think we're doing, but actually how it's landing. So do me a favor, and if you can, put in the chat, which one of those working assumptions is resonating most with you today? You don't have to say why. I just want to know where people are. Okay, I see some twos. Twos are winning. I promise not to make you too uncomfortable, I hope, but I just want to normalize that it might be a little uncomfortable. Even the term white supremacy culture is uncomfortable for people, and I'll tell you a story about that, actually. Yep, everybody can learn and grow. That's so hard, especially with adults. It's easy to think that kids can learn and grow, but it's a struggle sometimes with adults. So thank you. So what the heck is white supremacy culture? What does it have to do with us? I promise this is relevant not just for people that identify as white, but also for people of color. So be honest, just with yourself. I'm not going to ask you to put anything in the chat or come off mute. But how many of you had a picture of this or a similar image in your head when you heard the term white supremacy? I know I did. It's kind of easy to think that's not me. Those are people that demonstrate and wear hoods and identify as, Nazis. We go to the most extreme in our head, right? And to me, what I found is the reason that we do that is because it's easier to say, that's not me. I'm not that kind of white person. Not all white people are like those white people. And really what we do when we're doing that is we want to be able to see ourselves, and I'll speak for myself. I want to be able to see myself as a good white person. And I'm not like those bad white people. But that gets in the way, right? This good, bad, binary, either or thinking you're either a good white person or a bad white person. We're all part of a system that, that reinforces kind of the white ways of being. So let's see what your current reaction is. And if you're with me, I'm on slide 10, and there's a link there to a Slido. I want to know kind of what's your current reaction to the term white supremacy. And so you might recognize the Courageous Conversations Compass, Courageous Conversations about Race Compass. Number one, are you having kind of a moral reaction to the term? There's something right or wrong. Are you having an intellectual reaction to the term? You have some questions about it. Emotional, you're having some feelings about the term. Or social, you want to do something about it. Oh, I see people are using the chat. That's easy. Let's do that rather than the Slido. I was trying to be all fancy, but you can absolutely just drop it in the chat if you feel comfortable. And I am dropping the slides in the chat again for people that are joining us. Very happy that you're here. Emotional, social, moral. I kind of figured we'd be all over the map with this. Okay, we got an intellectual. That's speaking to the doctor in me. I like that. Social, we got some people wanting to do something about it, which is good. We got to be action-oriented in our anti-racism. Intellectual. Okay, so we're all over the map with that, which is not surprising to me. If you just joined us, welcome. Again, I'm dropping the slides in the chat. So the thing with white supremacy, like I said, is that when we hear the term, we think of the stuff at the top of the line. KKK, the N-word, the overtly racist jokes, hate crimes. But we don't think about all the things under the line that are just kind of acceptable. Some of them are becoming less acceptable, thank goodness. But, you know, having a Eurocentric curriculum. In some of the communities I work in, the Confederate flag is not unusual to see when you're driving through places in the community. Denying that racism is an issue, having racist mascots, colorblindness. Like I said, I was lucky to be colorblind all the way through high school. So those are kind of that white supremacy that's operating that we don't necessarily see or think about when we hear the term. So where does this term come from? My intellectuals, heads up. This will hopefully resonate with you. Tema Okun and Kenneth Jones, who's now deceased, were two racial justice educators on the West Coast, and they were doing work with corporations about kind of anti-racism. They weren't calling it that. And they kept running into the same issues every company they worked with. And finally, they sat down and wrote about these patterns that they were seeing in the book, Dismantling Racism. And what they found are these characteristics. They're invisible. People don't talk about them, but they're always present. They're kind of the norms and standards, how people operate and do business, but nobody names them. And they're not just damaging to people of color, they're damaging to white people too, because they're just kind of operating underneath the surface, like a computer program that you don't even know is running in the background. And then they can be present even in organizations led by people of color. So we have a Black female superintendent right now, and I would argue that MCPS is steeped in white supremacy culture. So that's what they found. And then I am not a Potterhead, but my kids are. And I think that white supremacy culture is kind of like Voldemort. It thrives when you don't name it. It doesn't like to be named. And true story, we are doing a session at ANS this week where we're going to be talking about white supremacy culture, but we're not calling it that. We're calling it, and I'm looking at the paper, common organizational characteristics that undermine anti-racist efforts. Because like Voldemort, it's too scary to call a thing a thing. And so even though we're using the literature from Okun and Jones about white supremacy culture, we are not calling it that because it's too threatening. So let's dig into what these are. What are these characteristics that Okun and Jones kept finding when they worked with groups? Fear. People make a lot of decisions out of fear, especially the fear of conflict. To me, that's what we're doing this week. We're not calling a thing because we're afraid that calling it white supremacy culture will turn people off and then we can't get into the work. Right to comfort. we need to normalize the comfort of all the administrators by not calling it white supremacy culture, but calling it these characteristics that undermine anti-racism. Either or thinking, or the good bad binary I talked about, are you a good white person or bad white person, denial and defensiveness, individualism, one right way, urgency, worship of the written word. You're going to have a chance to explore these and pick ones that resonate with you, but I want to give you a couple examples of what they could look like for you as an educator. So I'll tell you a little bit about how they showed up for me. I was an 8th grade teacher, Silver Spring International, and I don't think it's really going to matter the grade level. I worked on an all-white grade level team, and we were planning a reward trip to encourage our students to behave. We got them all. I was big into this planning. I was a first-year teacher. You know, I didn't really have a life. I was going to put my all into this. We were going to go to the Air and Space Museum. We decided. So we got the whole 8th grade together in the cafeteria to announce, you know, if they behaved a certain way, I don't remember what the criteria was, that they'd get to go to the Air and Space Museum. And we announced this and they booed us. And I remember the more veteran teachers, you know, hustled everybody back to their homeroom, you know, and shut it down. And I remember sitting there, putting my head down on my desk. I had my homeroom and crying. So I was shedding my white woman tears. And when I think about it, I was exhibiting white supremacy culture. I was defensive. I wanted the kids to respect my intentions, that they should be grateful that they get off campus and go somewhere, even if it's not their first choice. They get to go to the Air and Space Museum. And then if I'm really honest, I wanted credit for planning the trip, because I put so much time and effort into it, which is individualism. I want that credit. I want that pat on the back. You're doing a good job. It was also paternalism, which is assuming that we knew what they would like rather than just asking them. We could have easily said to students, like, what would feel rewarding to you? Where would you want to go? But instead, we just assumed that we knew, because that's someplace we would like to go, they would want to go. So it was also right to comfort. The kids were giving us important information. Yeah, it did not feel good to be booed. But we centered our comfort as adults. Rather than saying, like, why are you booing? What's going on? We just shut it down, sent them back. I remember people were yelling at them. And this shows up a lot. You know, when somebody raises an issue that causes discomfort, we blame the person. We blame the kids for booing rather than saying, hey, like, maybe we should have asked them where they wanted to go. Here's another embarrassing example. That one at least was like 20 years ago. I can like have a little distance from it. But this, you know, I was a co-teacher my whole career, general ed, special ed. I even co-teach graduate classes. And I always took over. I participated in the planning, but I would take on all the action items after the meeting. You know, it doesn't matter. I'll do it on the night. I'll do it on the weekends. So I could spare them. They don't have to do it. They can enjoy their night or weekend. I'll do it. I'll do it. And then I got to this resentful place where I felt like the responsibility always fell on me. I would get burnt out and, you know, why aren't they doing anything? Well, because white supremacy culture, I was, you know, buying into individualism in one right way. The belief that, you know, if it was going to get done right, I have to do it. That's one right way, that there's a way to do it and that I can take it on and get it done my way when I'm not collaborating with other people, which, you know, I'm not trusting my colleagues and I'm micromanaging it because then I can't control it. And a lot of times these were veteran teachers that were, you know, more experienced than me, which is even more kind of embarrassing. I wasn't acknowledging that, you know, we get a better product when we work as a team. And again, it's that individualism. I want credit, like, oh, you made this great lesson, Heather. But it would have been better if we all worked on it together. So what we're going to do is you're going to pick one of those characteristics. And there's a link on slide 20 to, it's a long booklet, so don't get overwhelmed. You're just going to pick one of them. that you think shows up for you. Like clearly you can see from my example, individualism kept showing up for me. So maybe I want to look at individualism, but maybe there's other ones. And what you're going to do is on slide 21, and I'll put it in the chat in a minute when I finally shut up, is there's a capture sheet for you where you can write down what are the characteristics of that element of white supremacy culture. And then what are some of the antidotes? The booklet offers a description of it and then some ways to work against it. Don't do the middle column yet. If this works for you, great. If the capture sheet doesn't work for you, that's fine too. I'm going to give you a full 10 minutes because it's kind of deep and it involves some reflection. So if you want to turn off your screen, I'll kind of cue you through, but let's just get this in the chat for you as the booklet. Sorry. Here's the booklet with all the characteristics. You can just pick one to look at real deeply. And then if it's helpful for you, it's on slide 21, but here's the capture sheet. Okay. So camera's off if you want. I'll keep track of time. And you just have some time to explore. And share my screen again. So hopefully you had some time to dive into at least one of the characteristics of white supremacy culture as articulated by Okun and Jones. I find I keep going back to it. You know, I've been actively studying and reflecting on white supremacy culture since 2020 now, maybe a little bit before that, 2019. And I still have to ask myself every day, how is it showing up when I collaborate with colleagues and I want to just take the work? I still want to just take the work and do it on my own and then bring it back as this beautiful finished product. How does it show up in how I interact with students or caregivers? In my grading policies, I still teach grad and doc students. And so am I forcing one right way? Am I holding them to super high standards that forces them to try to be perfect, to give into perfectionism? How does it show up when I design assessments? There's lots of ways that white supremacy culture has permeated our system. And I really feel like we have to be able to pivot away from it. You know, when I was defensive with those students, it was really easy for me to say, well, I didn't mean it that way. I was trying to pick something fun for them to do. I was trying to make life easier for my colleagues. And so I love that Okun and Jones give us some antidotes, some ways to not do that, you know, that I need to be able to receive feedback. There need to be processes for people to give voice to, you know, their thoughts and maybe even objections about things. And when I do something that's harmful, I need to be able to name it and say, you know, I didn't listen to you all. I didn't ask your opinion on where you wanted to go for the trip, and I should have done that. So, you know, let's have a conversation. What would feel rewarding to you? But it's not easy to go between the two, to the way we've always done business to, you know, a non-white supremacy way. And so that middle column is important. We have to pivot. And how do you pivot when it's something that's ingrained in us? For me, I have to remember it's not about me. I am not the center of the universe. I am not the individual that, you know, gets all the credit or does the right thing. I am paid to serve the students of MCPS. And so I have to seek out their opinions and their voices and not just do things my way or even the MCPS way if it doesn't serve students. And especially when I'm doing work around race, I have to be careful not to tone police women of color. One of the students that booed me the most loudly, I remember her name was Karen, and she was a Black female student and she was loud. And I know that back then as a white woman, I perceived her as aggressive. And so I lost her critical feedback because of my perceptions about her based on her race. So I have to be really careful as a white woman to not let the messages get lost in my emotions, to not shed those white women tears. So I know we haven't had a ton of time together. I just hope that this will give you a framework to name and critically reflect on white supremacy culture and how it shows up for us, because I truly believe, we're going to be talking about this at ANS this week. Noticing these characteristics and how they show up is a key step towards anti-racist action. That we're not just going to do things the way we've always done them, because they're not working for everybody in our community. So thank you for joining me today. And I'm going to put our evaluation in the chat so that you can give me some feedback. And I'll also stop sharing my screen and I'll be here. Our time together doesn't end till 10:15 if anybody has questions or comments or anything else. So thank you for joining me. And please be sure to give me some feedback.
I just have a quick question. Is there a second session?
There is a second session. I believe the second sessions start at 10:30 and go to 11:15.
Okay, and is it the same link?
It should be the same link, yeah.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for joining me.
So, earlier the lady was asking for, but the second session is the same material again.
Correct. It's not a continuation. It's the same one.
Perfect. Thank you. That's what I was checking on. Thank you.
Yep. I'm sorry. I wasn't clear.
No, that's okay. I wasn't clear in my question.
What's the session name? Because I don't see what I thought it was.
Let's get real about whiteness.
Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, thanks, Crystal. That's my lifelong battle, I think.